Hey guys, my name is Damian Plisco and welcome to my first ever tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do a composite of this Porsche 911 Carrera GTS, which I shot at a dealership at nighttime. It has a nice little spotlight coming down on it, but obviously this photo needs a lot of love. It's quite boring at this moment here. So today I'm going to show you how I took this photo from this to this using some basic Photoshop tools. So let's begin. So first and foremost, I'm going to show you guys the original image. We're going to kind of work backwards, and I'm going to show you how I took this car and basically brought into the different environment that you see at the end. But the first things first is you want to make sure that this image doesn't have any unwanted reflections, because when you bring it into the other environment, you want to make it a lot cleaner. You don't want to see any reflections of vehicles and any other light sources that may not be in the final image. So what I did here is basically I used a couple basic tools to get rid of the different reflections and the different light sources. For most of it, I just basically used the clone stamp tool just to get rid of the different light sources. As you can see, my computer's chugging a little bit, but basically it's pretty basic. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the clone stamp tool. You hit option, and then you sample the one area, and then you click on where you want it to get rid of whatever unwanted image you have there. So you can keep doing this. Basically, I'm not gonna go through the whole entire car, but just wanted to obviously this kind of looks like crap, but I can show you another tool, which is the patch tool. It's quite easy to use as well. Basically what you do is you select a little portion of the unwanted image, you drag it and see how it kind of samples around, and you can basically choose whichever part of the image you want it sampled to. So let's go here, and it kind of does its magic just like that. So let's try that again here. That looks much better. We can basically do a couple of these things at a time. Again, I'm doing just a quick job just to demonstrate to you guys what kind of tools you can use to achieve this effect. For this car here, reflection of the car, again, you can use this tool here, and then you can take this little sensor out as well. But basically that's what it is. Next step would be to crop the image out, because it's obviously sitting on this ugly stamped driveway here. You can see some plants in the background. You can see another dealership in the background. You want to get rid of all of that because we're going to be putting in a different ground, and we're going to be putting in a different background in. So what you do here is you use the pen tool. You can actually use this tool here, the lasso tool, or you can use the pen tool. I prefer using the pen tool because you can adjust all the little anchor points. But you basically, what you want to do is you want to crop the car out from the background. And I'm doing a pretty crappy job right now, but I'm not going to crop the whole car out because I've already done it. I just want to show you guys this is what you do. And then once you have it cropped, then you delete the original background. But what I did in this instance is I cropped the car, and then I cropped out the shadow separately because as you can see, the shadow here has the stamped driveway still. So what I actually did is I drew the shadow myself. So I drew a shape like this, doing a quick job again. Okay. And then just to match the original image, I actually applied a Gaussian blur to it, just very slightly. Just rasterize it and then apply the Gaussian blur, just to make it match the original. There you go. So once I cropped the car out, as you can see, I cropped the shadow out, and this way you don't see the stamped driveway anymore. But let's delete that. So this is the original. I just want to kind of give you guys a breakdown of exactly all the little elements that are used in this photo to have this full effect. So I'm just going to show you, I'm going to turn off all the layers, and I'm just going to show you basically the car. I didn't have to be very precise with the cropping of the cars because the background behind it is black. So the car itself is very dark around the edges. So when you actually apply the background behind it, you can't really tell the edges of the car at all. I mean, I should have done a way better job cropping it out, but just to show you, this is what the car looks like cut out. And what I did in this file is I already merged the shadow with the car, so it's just one file, just to cut down on the amount of layers. So let's go through these layers one by one. So let's start with the bottom, and this is the ground. So what I did is I went on Google and I found just a texture of an image of concrete or asphalt. And then what I did, what I did just to make it look like so it's still in perspective with the car, like in the original, I actually used the transform and perspective tool to kind of, obviously, so it doesn't look totally flat. And this is already done with this image here, but this is what you do is you want to make sure that the texture itself looks like it's part of the environment. So you want to make it look like it's in perspective as well. So whatever's closest to you will have a larger texture versus whatever's further away. My computer's a little slow, but anyway, so that's basically what I did with this is I just basically found the texture and I brought it in here and I substituted it with whatever the original was. Next up, let me just show you the car. Again, there's no, I'll go through the layers later just to show you the different levels that I applied to make the car more bright. But basically, this is what it looks like right now. Not very nice at all, but you can see it begins to take form with the ground here. With this particular texture as well, just to make it a little dark at the bottom, what I did is I drew a black rectangle. I applied a mask to it. And then I feathered it out. Oops, wrong way. There you go. So just to kind of give you guys an idea. See how it's dark at the bottom and then it just kind of brightens up. Basically that's what it is, just a mask, and then I applied like an overlay effect to it, or I guess it's really subjective what you do, but that's basically what it is, just to give it a little bit more depth as well. So yeah, that's what I did with the ground. And then what I did for the background is basically drew a black rectangle. And again, I did the same effect. So it almost looks like the car is obviously, it's emerging from the shadows. But you can see when you disable the layer mask, that's basically what it kind of looks like. And you enable it, and it looks like it's kind of part of the environment, right? Looking into the darkness. So that substitutes the ugly background that was back there for the dealership. Next up, what I did was, as you can see in the final image, I applied a smoke, kind of like a smoke effect, just to give it, some cool atmosphere. And what I did with this is I found a cool vector of a smoke texture on EPS that I found online that I basically brought in here. And as you can see, I basically started playing around with it and layering it a lot. And what you want to do basically is you want to experiment. Everybody's different. Everybody likes different effects. But what you want to do is just make sure that it's layered enough that it's realistic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all the different layers that were applied here. So that was one of the first layers. Again, there's a layer mask that was applied to it, so it kind of fades out the smoke. What I did next is I applied a white overlay to it just to kind of make it pop more because it's kind of dark. And as you can see, the white overlay also starts to bring out some of the highlights in the ground. So the light source in the original photo was coming from the right-hand side, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Is kind of give the effect that the light's still obviously from the right-hand side and the car is more in the shadow on the left-hand side. Next up, we have another layer of smoke, which is on the left-hand side. And this blend mode is screen mode. So if I go back to normal, it doesn't make too much of a difference because it's already a transparent image, but you can do anything you really like, whatever works the best, I guess, for this particular example. But you can use lighten as well. But again, you want to start layering it so it looks three-dimensional. You don't want to keep it flat. So that's the smoke on the left that I applied. So this is interesting, actually. For this one, it's what it is, as you can see, it kind of makes the ground fade into the darkness a little bit more seamlessly. So it's a little bit more realistic. It was too harsh before. So what I did with this, I didn't use the smoke effect. What I did with this one is I drew a white rectangle and I applied again I applied a Gaussian blur to it, quite a large Gaussian blur actually. It may not come out the same as it did in the photo when I did it, but just to kind of give you an idea exactly how I arrived at this. Yeah, so it's not exactly the same, but you get the idea. Again, it's all about the layering, and you want to make it as realistic as possible. So let's just go through all the smoke layers. So this one, as you can see, is in front of the car layer. So what I want to do here is obviously you want to make it three-dimensional by having some smoke layers behind the car, in front of the car, on the side of the car, just to give it a bit, more dimension. And not all of it's at 100% as well. Like I played around with, the different levels of opacity here. This is what's basically I arrived at just because that's what I was happy with. Again, this is all very subjective. You guys can, when you guys are making your own photos, you can choose to obviously do any kind of opacity. There's no right or wrong on this. It's all a matter of basically, I guess, taste and subjectiveness, I guess. Moving on to the taillights, I wanted to give the car a little bit more life. It was shot at nighttime. The car wasn't on. So what I wanted to do is make it look like the lights, tail lights were actually on. So what I did for this, as you can see, this is what it looks like. I also added some blur to it. But what I basically did is I Googled Porsche 911 Carrera GTS taillight. I found a couple JPEGs, but I found this one in particular. And what I did is I cropped out the taillight itself. I brought it into the composition. I scaled it down. And that's basically it. It's a dirty little trick, but it worked in this scenario. I also masked it a little bit. Again, this is subjective what I did, but as you can see, that's what it looked like before. That might not be what the taillight actually looks like in real life, but I took creative license with this one and ran with it. So as you can see, the photo's starting to take shape nicely. I applied the taillight effect, the smoke effect. I put a new ground in. This one's just a quick delete of the dealership name. I still I didn't like the yellow that was in the car. So what I did with this is I applied a hue and saturation effect just to the car and I'll just open this up for you guys. I took out basically the yellows, as you can see right here. The yellows, and I brought them down to 0, so it matches. So it matches a lot better to the overall look and feel of this image that I'm trying to create here. What I also did is I played around with the levels, and I bumped up the highlights and took the shadows down a little bit so they're darker. So there's a bit more contrast now. See, that's the before and that's the after. It just feels a little bit more cohesive now. And then this little layer here is just an additional shadow that was in the original image as well. So I basically just duplicated that effect. I just basically duplicated the original shadow that I drew before, and I turned down the opacity quite a lot to 26%. And that's what it basically is. Nothing special, but it's just those little details that matter. Next up, I wanted to give this photograph a bit more color. I wanted to stylize it a little bit more. So I wanted to add a little bit more color, and by doing that, I basically drew a bunch of different rectangles, and I applied a radial mask to it. And as you can see, this one is red, and I applied a soft light blend mode to it, put down the opacity to around 75%. Again, all of this is very subjective, but this is what I did to achieve this effect. I also did this with a blue color, and then on top of that a red as well. And then and then here's another smoke layer in front of the car. And then I added white overlay just to, bring out those highlights a little bit more, make it a little bit more seamless. And then I also added a lens flare. You can't really tell too much, but it's those little details again that really matter. And for those of you who don't know how to apply a lens flare or how I did this, I basically the way I do it is I draw usually a black circle and then go to render lens flare. And you can choose any lens flare that you think is suitable for your composition. I'm just gonna choose this one, I guess. And then, as you can see, it's right here. And then I applied a screen blend mode to it. You can also do a lighten. And then you can still see the outer edges. So what I did is I applied a mask to it and then feathered it out a little bit. Ooh, reverse it. Feather it out. And just play around with it and bring it into here. Just, finesse it a little bit more. But yeah, basically that's what I did. So we're almost there. Just a couple more layers and we're done with this image. As you can see, it's coming along quite nicely. To top it off, I added another black rectangle. And then I basically just used a layer mask and feathered it. Let's just disable this for now. So you can see that's what it looks like, and then enable layer mask. So you can play around with it, but basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to make it look like, you know, the car is more in the shadow on this side and the light source is coming from this side. Just go back to how it was before. It was a linear kind of layer mask before, but yeah, that's basically what I did with this effect, just to kind of finish it off. And then on top of this, just to give the color, just to give this image a bit more style, I also applied a color balance. I wanted to kind of make this image a little bit more bluish, because right now it's a bit too black and white for me still. It's got some reds and blues, but I wanted to bring in a little bit more blue. So this is very subjective again, but what I did is basically just play around with these sliders for the midtones, highlights, and shadows. And again, when you're doing your photograph, there's other ways of doing this as well, but this is one method that I use to achieve this effect. Let's just go back to the way it was, but so that's basically what it is. As you guys can see, these are all very simple tricks, and the tools that I've used are all very common in Photoshop. Just takes practice and a bit of imagination. So I hope you guys enjoyed this not so quick tutorial. Next time around, as I get better at these, I will try and make them a lot quicker and to the point. But if you have any other ways of doing whatever I showed you guys today, feel free to leave your comments in the comments section. Let me know what you guys think, what you'd like to see in the future. Again, hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.